into sort of what I think is really interesting and is radical rule number 2 in restoring your gallbladder. And of course, it's not, the sexiest thing to talk about, but
very unsexy. It's a throwaway organ, the gallbladder.
Yeah. And it's where we find sort of what I would say is the holy grail for health and healing. And of course, that's the bile. So you talk about the bile being the forgotten switch. So do you want to talk about why bile is so important?
Yes, bile is just as important as probiotics. I'll repeat that again. And why is it so important? Because it's a detoxification method that we don't talk about. Bile does 3 important things in your body. The task number 1 is it breaks down fat. So if you don't have enough bile that's secreted at the right time when you're eating fats, you're not going to be digesting or absorbing essential fatty acids or healthy fats, number 1. Number 2, it flushes toxins. All of your extra hormones, exogenous hormone metabolites, and heavy metals are thrown into the bile. And number 3 is something that I talk about in this book that nobody else has written about, is it seems to have this alliance with the gallbladder, so that when your body secretes bile and it breaks down the fat, it also has the ability to secrete an enzyme that transfers T4 into T3. So there is an unholy, holy alliance between the bile, the gallbladder, and the activation of the thyroid. That's quite unusual, but there's good science to support it.
And so we all need to make sure that we have a healthy bile flow, because otherwise, even if we're eating the cleanest, most pristine diet in the world, doesn't make a difference if we're not digesting the food that we're eating. So you talk about most of us have toxic bile, and so can you talk about what that means and what we might see if we have toxic bile?
Well, the bile is congested because there are not a lot of natural thinning agents, because there's a lack of particular nutrients in the diet, which is why you need the bitters to thin the bile so that all the toxins can flow freely in your system and out for elimination. And you also need elements like bile salts to break down the toxins. If you do not have a gallbladder, so you're missing the timed release of bile in the first place, so you're not digesting all the fat that you're eating, which gives me a lot of pause to really look at what's going on with the ketogenic diets, a keto and paleo diet, which is much more high fat. A lot of people can't digest all that fat. It's why there's a lot of pancreatitis and kidney stones and problems with muscle strength that we're beginning to see with people on other high-fat diets. Fat is very difficult to digest unless you have the right bile, the right bitters, the right thinning agents, which is why in my book I teach you how to make your bitters, and I tell you the importance of bile salts and certain elements like the bile builder, which I created, that have a little bit of beetroot, a little bit of lipase, and another fatty acid, which is an amino acid, actually very important to break down bile, which is called taurine. So you need a lot of different elements that are lacking in today's diet to be able to counter the high-fat diet. So you're eating a lot of fat that is not being circulated properly and is making people actually more toxic. Yes, you can lose weight, but there's a great deal of toxicity that comes with that particular element.
See, that's so interesting. As you were talking, I started applying what you were saying and thinking about myself. And I've been paleo probably at least 4 or 5 years now. And when we first went paleo, I probably lost about 80 pounds. And over the past year, I've gained about 30 of that back. And no matter what, I can't lose it. And I tried keto, and it made me feel worse. And so I'm wondering, I'm thinking I probably wasn't digesting that fat good enough, and so all the butter and the coconuts and coconut oil that I was eating was probably contributed to why I feel like crap today. Even though I'm eating what everyone is telling me is healthy, I'm not digesting and absorbing anything. So
Yeah, and your body does well short term on a higher fat diet. And yes, you can balance your blood sugar, lose your seizures. I mean, there are a lot of benefits. Don't get me wrong. I've been out there a long time. I know that ketogenic diets and a keto program and a paleo program in the beginning is very healing. But long term, people are all suffering from the same kind of things that you're talking about, which is why you need to get radical and follow my program, because you can maintain some of those good elements, but you can assist in the digestion digestive piece which is missing, and the detox piece that is missing in those other programs.
Yeah, and here's the part of your book that I did not like, and it's only because these are kind of my favorite foods. But you talked about common sensitivities, like 3 common sensitivities associated with the gallbladder. And number 1 was eggs, 2 was onions, and 3 was pork. I don't eat a lot of pork, but I eat a boatload of eggs and onions, like daily. So do I really need to give up my eggs and onions?
You do for 21 days, and it's
Okay.
this is short term. This is not forever. But what the point is, when people read the book, they'll see there's a reason that I select those particular 3 foods. You give them up for 21 days. You can go back to them every 4 days. You do it on a rotation program, but you give your gallbladder and your bile a rest because they can be very pro-inflammatory if, in fact, you've got an issue going on with the gallbladder that's so important with the liver as a sister organ.
So is that kind of for everyone, or is that just for
it's for everybody. Eggs are highly allergic to many people, and they don't know it. And one of the reasons that you could be feeling the way you are is because of the allergic or food sensitivity, pro-inflammatory aspect of all those eggs. A little bit is good, but when you're on one of these diets, you're eating tons of eggs and ton of fat and ton of onions, and a lot of that really affects your ability to digest and could be an inflammation-producing element. But it's all pretty much explained in the book without giving away all the keys to the kingdom. But people feel dramatically better. They lose weight. And again, it's an elimination diet. Nothing is forever.
Okay. So let me ask you, do you know of any, so I use onions mainly as like a flavor component to my cooking. What would you suggest I use in replace of onions
Shallots.
For that month? Shallots? Oh, you can use those?
Yeah, it's just the onions.
Okay, good.
This is so easy peasy.
Talk about the role stomach acid plays in healthy bile.
Stomach acid is the forgotten genie. It's the forgotten genie. HCl is so important. If you're under stress, you're not secreting. If you're over the age of 40, you're not secreting it. If your blood type is A, you don't secrete it as much. You're probably hypochlorite. You have hypochlorhydria is actually the clinical term. So the reality is that when your body secretes stomach acid, it keys in the gallbladder to secrete the bile. So it releases the bile. The gallbladder is like the storage tank for the bile. If you do not secrete HCl, which the majority of Americans don't for all the reasons I've just spoken about, then you're not producing bile. So you have to substitute alternatives, whether that's HCl salts that you can take or an HCl digestive acid or bitters, which have the same proponent. And I talk about how to make your own bitters. We talk about the importance of certain foods that can produce HCl. Vinegar is one of them, apple cider vinegar. But HCl is incredibly important, and of course it's long forgotten.
Yeah, and where so many people are on these acid blocking drugs, it's just making us sicker. I know when I did my whole traditional medical checkup, this was thankfully I knew some things when I went to see, and they did their barrage of tests, and they were like, I don't know, here, try some acid blocking drugs, and I was like, no thanks.
No thank you.
Really, I just wanted to get a scope and make sure there wasn't anything serious. And since there's nothing serious, then okay, I know that you don't know anything to help me because you just said here.
Well, the other element of that, it's not just that we're lacking HCl, and a lot of times feelings of GERD or heartburn are actually a lack of HCl. So there's kind of this fine line, but you have to go a little deeper and look under the hood one more time. Sometimes people have a structural or mechanical imbalance, which could be a hiatal hernia where the stomach is pushed up. So you have to get that pushed down, and that may end your problems right then and there. So you have to become a nutritional detective. I've written about this in a number of books, including, of course, Radical Metabolism. But I would say that stomach acid is a key player because if you do not secrete enough of it as you get older for various and sundry reasons, then you're not digesting protein, you're not breaking down iron or calcium because those are iron-based minerals.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about how estrogen affects the gallbladder and, of course, through the gallbladder, the bile.
Well, estrogen, it can, if it's not broken down properly in the liver, then all those metabolites are thrown into the bile and it makes it very congested. And then your body secretes more cholesterol. So you've got to make sure that you're breaking down the estrogen metabolites, the xenoestrogens in the environment, or the estrogens that you're even getting from phytoestrogens in your food. And you do that by supporting the liver. That's where your lemon and water come in handy, a supplement called DIM, cruciferous vegetables, or calcium D-glucarate. Lots of different things that you need to do as we get older. So estrogen is an important element to consider because it can be toxic estrogen if it's thrown into the bile and your body can't eliminate it properly.
Got it. And doesn't estrogen like send the signal to the body to produce more bile?
Yes,
Making
it does,
it even more congested
and more cholesterol.
Yeah. And so I've only heard this from one person, but I wanted to ask you since you kind of know everything.
I've had a lot of it. I don't know everything. I've just had a lot of practical experience. There are a lot of people that write books that haven't had the experience. So I can tell you from my own experience, and I would never tell you something that I don't know either from clinical research or my own experience. So go ahead and ask me this crazy question.
Well, I've heard stevia. Stevia is like, the best, sweetener to use aside from, it's the best sweetener to use. But I heard on a podcast, I can't remember which one, I won't throw them under the bus, but that stevia had high estrogen compounds in it. Have you heard of that?
No, okay. But what I will tell you is that for more and more people, they're becoming more sensitive to stevia the way they become sensitive to sucralose in the past, or even sugar. So quite frankly, if I need a sweetener, a natural sweetener, I'm going back to maple syrup, 100% maple syrup.
And is that you prefer grade A or grade B, or does it matter?
I think it's the grade B. I think it's the grade B that I prefer, whatever is organic and unfiltered, because I know from that research that there's certain antioxidants that are very helpful for diabetics. And there's nothing like a little maple syrup to just be very satisfying long term. And it's, it's a natural food. That is my number one. It's lower in fructose than honey. Honey would be my second favorite sweetener. And then comes the stevia.
Okay, cool. Now, so you had mentioned some of the things to restore your healthy bile, and one of the things that's good is choline. And I've been using sort of lecithin as a choline supplement, but in your book you said you were no longer recommending lecithin be used because there are better sources. Do you want to talk about that?
I've gone back to the lecithin. You're just fine with the lecithin.
Okay, yeah.
There was one study. No, I had to be transparent. There was one little study that shed a little concern about that. But to be quite honest with you, a non-GMO soy lecithin, 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, keeps everything flowing properly. Great source of choline, or the sunflower lecithin, whatever you prefer. But that would be great for a child that has autism. Very good for the cell membrane. And the other thing to understand, Dave, is that if you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which has become rampant, you need choline. Choline within 2 months will decongest a fatty liver.
My last question about the gallbladder is, we don't have to do sort of like an intense gallbladder cleanse or anything like that to restore our bile, do we?
No, just do my 4-day intensive.
And you're kind of anti these cleanses, right?
I'm anti these cleanses because bile stones can get caught in the bile duct and they can be life-threatening. So less is more. Easy does it. If you do my 4-day intensive, you're getting a proper juices that will cleanse the gallbladder, as well as my watercress soup, which is very gallbladder cleansing because it's a very high bitter. So the program is very much all figured out in the book, taking the right bitters, maybe do it yourself. You can go to the health food store, get some bitters, get some angelica root, get some, even some dandelion root tea is considered a bitter. There's so many ways to be able to deal with this situation. But if you're on a high-fat diet, you must at least read the book so you know what you're doing the right way.